Good afternoon. Well, I said I'd do this update at the weekend and failed dismally because the weather was too good. So I'm here now Monday. And we've had an interesting start to the week with a lot of retracements on the indices. So I did the last update, I think, in Q2. I think it was just before the end of June, and in an effort to get all the crosses and alerts history off my chart so I can actually see what I'm doing one slightly sooner this time. And also just because it helps me think about what's going on in the charts. It's not really an analysis session. It's more of a results session, just to see the good, the bad, on the alerts that I've been setting. And it's challenging. And I feel like I've said it before that in some cases, I feel like I want to put a question mark. I put disclaimers when I write the alerts, like if I'm thinking, because obviously we're trying to get bounces between zones. And if the price moves very fast, then you don't necessarily get the bounce on the zone you want if you're counter trend. And then we've got other situations like Aussie dollar, for example, which has been horrifically sideways, I think, for 3 months or longer. Which has been given great bounces, but then it's running through and taking highs when it wants to. So the zones are a lot weaker. So I tend to make comments in the alerts as to whether I think the zone is weaker, not specifically that, but I'll say it's coming from, it's a daily supply, but it's coming from a monthly demand, for example, which to me, the message is it's not as high probability that, because it's counter a higher time frame trend. So yeah, I feel like I should put question marks instead of crosses for some cases, because then I can know, where things have gone horribly wrong. I mean, sometimes I remember if I do this results video sooner, then I'll remember what's happened. But if I take too long to do it, particularly when I've done the quarterly ones last time, then I tend to forget what I've said when it hit a level. It doesn't matter so much. And the whole point, so anybody who's new to this, the alerts go into my Telegram channel, I think I'll put the link. I think the link is in the description. You can go in there and then you can see when an alert hits. So it'll say, euros heading daily supply, for example. And then you decide whether you want to take the trade. Things may have changed since I set the alerts, particularly not all the charts I'm 100% on top of. Sometimes I just throw alerts in quickly and see what happens when it gets there. But yeah, do your own analysis, and then you're looking at the lower time frames for reversal, or trade opportunities in those zones as and when they're hit. When I trade, I use a lot of Confluence. So, and I could show you in a minute. Actually, for example, this weekend, the dollar, as you can see here, has made a weekly demand, and euro dollar, pound dollar, Aussie dollar, New Zealand dollar, I think they've all made weekly supply. Euro dollar is virtually at it, whereas the others are quite a lot further away. So I'll consider when euro hits it, then I'm expecting. So, and the reason I say that is because if the dollar hits at the same time here and all the others hit together, then the dollar is driving those price moves. So on euro US, pound US, etc., the dollar, if they're all hitting together, then the dollar is driving the price move. If the euro dollar, for example, hits when pound dollar and the others haven't hit a particular zone, then you might find the euro drives the move. So I'm then looking at euro Aussie, euro New Zealand, etc., to see if there's confluence for the euro to be dropping or driving the price move on the euro dollar chart. So either of the pairs, based on the quote, can drive the price move. Typically, obviously, dollar drives most of the price moves. Yeah, it's always worth keeping an eye on dollar chart. Anyway, that's my intro. So feel free to follow my FX channel if you want to get the alerts, and all my Twitter, like all the alerts automate from TradingView to Telegram to Twitter, or X, should I say. So feel free to follow my X as well if you want to see the alerts there. Well, I've been told by one of my group that it's cluttered and I shouldn't send them there as well, but I may reconsider that down the track, but for the moment, it's okay. So as I said, for example, on Aussie US, that went sideways for a really long time, particularly here, because the dollar took its time dropping, deciding if it was going to bounce here. There's a small zone over there. and just high time frame potentially swing fell that zone or come back down as the annual demand. So I was waiting for a while to get into the annual demand, and that's why Aussie was messing around so much, and we got a bigger move, I think, on the euro at that time, so the euro going up while the dollar coming down. So it's the magnitude. So that, when I say zones don't have to hit at the same time, there's a magnitude issue. So mostly the pairs that I just mentioned, the majors, will all, so the majors because dollar yen is also a major, but mostly euro US, pound US, Aussie US, New Zealand US will all drop together. And at the same time, dollar CAD and dollar yen will go up at the same time. So all of those things will happen if the dollar is driving the price, but they don't necessarily have to go up with the same magnitude. So what it can also tell you is maybe price isn't ready to move. So for example, if euro US hits the weekly supply and the dollar here hits weekly demand, if the others still need to move, you may find the pound has to do something to get the pound dollar up there, and it might not be ready. So it doesn't necessarily mean a zone is going to break, but it could mean it's not ready. And that's what we saw here with the Aussie. So anyway, that's just a bit of background and how I take trades and how I use the Confluence when these alerts are hitting. So what we have now is we've got the dollars hit this annual zone. Let's go up to the annual chart. So excuse me, my charts have obviously got a lot of information. So on the annual, they look, the higher time frames, they look very busy. So we've hit this annual zone here. It's a decent zone. We did break through this annual zone here, but obviously there's time to close back higher with another 5 months of the year to go. But yeah, so this was an area that hadn't been tested before, and it was an area that was potentially could give some decent longs and some decent up moves. I think in the interim we have made a 6-month supply, so we did again close below that zone. So I do have an alert there. The other challenge I've had with alerts in general, you see that 3 months just very slightly higher that I've alerted. And there's another 3 months down here, which could get a rounded retest. So this can still get deeper in the zone. So I think the other challenge has been, while this has, this annual zone here, and it's now got a large 6-month, 3-month supply, the same as applied on the majors. They've got huge zones. And in some cases, you'll find there's a reaction immediately off the level. Quite often you find there's an immediate reaction, which is why it's always worth watching. So for example, here we have, as soon as the dollars hit that annual, we've had a decent up move. It did take a little bit of time in the first week, but that doesn't mean it's now just going to go up. And that's where I struggle a little bit, I guess, because this tells me, yes, I'm solidly long biased, but I also know that it doesn't have to bounce off the top of this zone. And we have a large, as I just showed, annual zone. So it can bounce off the top and go up, or it can still come all the way back down to the bottom of here if it wants, before, and still retain that annual demand. Still support, not support it. Losing my train of thought. It can still, it can still be a valid annual demand even if it comes all the way down to the bottom. And that's what we saw on the euro as well. So the euro and the euro and pound, etc., they all had a massive 3-month demand at the start of this year, but they retraced almost all the way to the bottom, I believe, before reversing. I guess we're seeing that here. Yeah, it was the same as this. This actually did make a higher high, but at the same time, obviously euro, etc., were dropping. But they went all, this huge zone here, they went all the way to the top. So yeah, what I'm looking for now is, is this going to continue? So we've had this decent move off the annual demand. We've come back up into 2-week supply up here. There's a 3-month sort of flip level here, and then we've got 3- and 6-month supply a little bit higher. So it would have been nice to have this just run straight up into there, but NFP brought us down at the end of last week. And now we have made new weekly demands. So as I said, on all the majors, I've alerted now the weekly demand, the weekly supply, the inverse of this chart. And we'll just see what happens. This is a 3-day, then a 5-day, and a weekly here, and it's just sort of thinking about what it's doing. But it's the question now for me is, we have been in a downtrend since the start of the year. We've hit a major zone, but are we going to continue this downtrend? And this is just a retest for continue, or is this a reversal? So you're looking at, is this obviously there's a possibility of the higher time frame reversal. But the challenge for me is what's my bias, and particularly when these zones are so large. Like weekly zones are much easier, unless they're counter or monthly or something like that, but they tend to be easier because they're smaller. And obviously you're trading on much lower time frames. Most people aren't investors. And also I just think, to me, I was thinking about it recently, whether I would hold, if I had millions of pounds and I didn't need to leverage trade or anything like that. And would I just sell here on 6 months supply and be happy to hold it even if it goes way higher or way lower, like an investment strategy? And I think I wouldn't. I mean, there's too much that happens in the world. So, and we already saw this annual zone break with this giant broadening wedge playing out. So, it's not something, I think on the indices would be one thing, but because they sort of perpetually go up. But on FX, obviously it's more cyclical, so you wouldn't necessarily want to hold it for indefinite periods of time, but you're just looking for trades as and when they hit the zone. So if this hit 6 month supply, it probably wasn't a 6 month at that time, I'm not sure what, but 3 day even inside. So it's the annual demand, and then I'm just looking to trade the first bit of it. I do get a little bit of frustration. I did take a short on NASDAQ right at the top on Thursday or Wednesday. But obviously NASDAQ, when you zoom out, you start thinking, okay, well, I'm shorting this thing, look at it. But it's very frustrating then when it does do the drop afterwards. Anyway, so that's pretty much it on the dollar. I'm just looking to see, are we going to get a bounce in the next day or two, or now off this top area here? Are we going to dip deeper inside? And then obviously the possibility that this still plays out that weekly downtrend, but I need to see a little bit more on this first. So let's move on to the Euro-Pound layout. So from a Confluence perspective, again, if you haven't followed me before, I group things together somewhat logically so I can see the Confluence aspect. So here we've got Pound US on the top left and the Euro US on the bottom right. So I can see when those are hitting zones at the same time. And then I've got Euro Pound, which is the triangulation of Pound and Euro US, because then I can see what's driving the price move. And then here I just happen to have Pound Aussie on the other. It's not necessarily relevant to these three, but that then helps me because I then move on to the Aussie setup, which I've got Aussie US, Aussie CAD, and Euro Aussie, and I can look at, I'm considering the triangulation of Aussie US and Euro Aussie against Euro US. Sorry, it becomes complex. So I assume if you follow this yourself, you'll understand what I mean. But it's can be a little bit hard to explain. But basically, I'm looking at the triangulation of pairs. So what generally I expect is for if Pound US hits a supply, then I expect that to drop, and then I would expect Euro Pound normally to go up. Doesn't have to, and doesn't have to with the same magnitude as I mentioned before. You could find it just hangs out a little bit, but typically I expect Euro Pound to be at support when Pound US is at resistance, and vice versa. So yeah, let's start on Euro US and see how the alerts went. So I'm running from, I think, mid-June, sort of is around when I started. So this kind of looking at it is what we're going to find, I think, when I was running through and sorting out my objects and grouping and folders and things. Like I said, the difficulty was these massive macro zones. So I think Euro actually had so Euro, like the dollar in reverse from the dollar, has a massive annual supply here. And it already tapped a couple of times into it. But that doesn't mean it's not going to reject again. So it's tapped a couple of times into it, but it hasn't made a lower low below this wick. And obviously it can reverse here if it wants. But something I'd be conscious of looking for longs into a zone like this. So generally I'm a bit more short biased, but then I'm also cautious of the fact that it could be a reversal. I mean, essentially it's a sideways range when you look at it. But I'm cautious of looking for longs when we're at a sort of resistance. So the major resistance, so we've got the annual supply here, and then also these two previous highs. This has now made a 6 month demand below, and a 3 month, so similar to the dollar. That's got the 3 month, 6 month supply. This has a 3 month, 6 month demand. And then we came up, so on the euro, we came up into this 3 month supply up here. So again, looking for shorts to potentially just drop back down, even if we then looking to getting back into longs around, what's that, the 1.1, just below 1.12 mark. So that was kind of my bias. So it was looking for shorts, but I also wanted to wait. I think so. Obviously on this, I didn't get particularly short biased too early. Some of them you'll see I'm kind of short biased too early. Well, not too early, but again, with the size of the zones. But I think this, I actually did want it to come up into the monthly 3-month supply. I think maybe I was looking for shorts over here in case we got a swing fail of these previous highs. But obviously it's come up a bit higher. So the challenge again is knowing when the reversal's happening. So you can get, so this black tends to be a swing failure or a slightly dubious. It's either a swing fail alert that I've set or it's a dubious alert that I'm not sure about. So I think in this case, probably was looking for a swing fail of that high and it's gone a little bit higher. Or it might have been a local swing fail on the low time frame in there. Gone back into a long, so I still retain the long bias, but then it's looking to see, are we going to get that reversal? And particularly in situations like this, I'm looking, so this is fine for a scalp on the day. So while it looks like, oh, you're shorting too early, but on the higher time frame, that's actually fine for a scalp on the day. Possibly I would have wanted it to get back down into here before the run up. So at times I'm thinking, where might I get a rejection to and from? So for example, over here, you know, I'm longing, I think this was a weekly demand back in the time, but then I'm looking for the higher low because I was thinking maybe we'll get up to this monthly level up here. It had left some stops up here, gone up higher, but it hasn't taken out all the stops above. So it was like, maybe this is going to run from here up for another wave before dropping. So sometimes, you know, I'm looking for alerts, entries like these, which obviously didn't work very well there. So this would have been the alert for the first hit on this 3-month supply. And yeah, again, small reaction off the levels, gone a little bit higher inside it. So this is essentially a macro alert, which has worked fine. And there's been some good ones in here. And then as of Friday, was that Friday or was that Thursday? I don't know, it was the start of last week. So as Monday last week, it's, you know, it run down and actually broke some local structure on the lower time frame. Now still higher time frame, we're still coming off a weekly, I think that's 3 weekly demand there. And it's had a decent move up. So again, it's those competing time frames. This is still in an uptrend on the 3-week. So it could still very easily just come off, you know, be it stopping there or just keeping going. So that's from a 3-week perspective. From a 3-month perspective, as I've said, look for potentially for bigger shorts, but it doesn't mean it can't go higher in the zone. And that's where you're looking for the confluence with everything else. Is everything else ready to get that bigger move if you're wanting to hold on to it? Since me, I don't particularly hold on to things, but yeah, this is just sort of advice for anybody who follows me. You know, who might be struggling to know whether to hold or not. Frankly, I think, you know, if you're at the computer reasonably frequently, then you're not really a holder. You probably just want to take these little scalps. If you're in the direction of trend, maybe something like this, you can hold longer. But I mean, I think it's very easy to say with hindsight, you know, this, you could have gone, right, I'm going to hold this longer, thinking it's going to come up to there, and then it's made a lower high. But certainly once you start reaching the start or the end of an impulse on a retest, you want to start either trading your stop or looking at taking some profit off it. So yeah, now we've come up. So yeah, again, not too bad on the dollar from the previous results. I haven't got loads on this, just 4 or 5 entries. Some of them I've been more aggressive on and some less. Yeah, so one that failed and a few others that were decent, depending on what time frame you could have been traded, and then a nice one on Friday coming in to hit into that 3-week. And now we're up in, you know, I had an alert on Friday for 5-day supply here, and we've got that weekly a little bit higher. So as I said at the start of the video, the weeklies are a little bit challenging because firstly, because we're still coming off 3-week demand at the bottom. So this still has that opportunity. Secondly, because they're large weekly supplies with this big drop. And now we see a mixture of outcomes at this point. You know, we can get a reaction immediately off the level, and it just depends on the confluence where the rest of the market is, etc. So it could react here. Hence, I've alerted, you know, maybe it's reacted already. We'll see. It's already hit the 5-day level, but I did set an alert at the weekend because that one went last week. And typically, or commonly, we would take out the high or low of the previous week if the price is close to it. So on the Monday, it wouldn't have surprised me if this pushes up into here. But also it could come all the way back to the top there, and there's an 8-hour So there's an 8-hour supply there. I haven't alerted that for a short, and I probably won't, because I think if it does come up this high, then it means that 3 weeks doing its thing and is super strong and could well take out the whole consolidation high. Yeah, so that's that on euro dollar. Pound dollar is also a challenging one, or has been challenging. I think the pound pairs have been my weakest. I think when I was going through it the weekend, I think these were the weakest entries that I had because of exactly the challenge. And I think even back here, because of exactly the challenge I was talking about, that so this level here was when we came into 3-month supply, and that was back in May, and it's taken however many months to possibly reverse. Since then, it's also made a 3-month demand. So let's just show you the 3-month chart. And it's a huge zone. So I've got a 3-month demand here, but it runs all the way down to the base there. So we've just come off the top of it. 3-month supply here. So again, I think it just missed hitting on that on the last year. So it's come up higher inside it. So the 6-month has anything? Yeah, so it's got a 6-month demand a bit lower. But yeah, it's a huge 3-month zone. So again, like my bias becomes difficult here because I know I've got a 3-month supply right above me, and I know we've confirmed not the best 3-month demand because it's got a couple of green candles leading away. It has not really the most significant move away from it. And the fact it's a very, very big zone. So again, the bias has been hard. Like once we confirmed that at the end of June, then I was kind of like, well, I want to long off that, but then this is making me want to short. So, and as the example I gave earlier, you can see here we had this 3-month demand down here, and you can see that when it pushed all the way up, it really came back down. So that was the start of the year, monthly. So on here, you know, we didn't hit a low until the 1st of January, which is when it had basically gotten nearly to the bottom of the 3-month demand at the base. So that was very hard, and I think that would have been the updates I had last year, that this 4-month run of down that we had at the end of last year was challenging. You know, there were major zones here. We had a monthly, all that were really locally tested. I think there were monthlies and weeklies and 3-weeklies throughout here that I was looking for longs on and just weren't really giving much at all. I think, you know, like you can see here, we got a bit of a move there, but then really fell off at the beginning and fell off at the end. And it's like the challenge I have on this is this going to do the same? You know, are we looking now at having this significant drop here? And which is very possible if the dollar does pick up off the annual demand, whether or not the dollar goes back for a lower low, or at least just taking out that previous low, like this can still go back up and then have that bigger move. But, you know, are we already in this type of move? You know, got a very similar structure here. But the difference, I think, is these probably wouldn't have had. Actually, no, this did have. Although, like I said, did have the 3-monthly demand, which it then went right to the bottom of. So, again, just trading zones as and when they're hit. So I don't like my bias on this is awkward and off. So be conscious of that. You know, if you've got a better bias than me, feel free to share. So this has made a new weekly supply here. So I've just added a local alert there, and again with the same challenge that Euro US dollar has, that it's a massive zone. We've got a trend line stops above, which it hasn't, which is left behind. That was my previous alert, hoping we'd go out and take the trend line stops, which we didn't. So I had, you know, a failed short there. I think just looking for the lower high at that point in time, or looking just for a reaction. I don't know if I had a reaction in lower time frame, and it just plowed straight through it. Then there was a possibility of a swing failure, just taking out the stops in the previous high, but again, just a small move. And I was being a little bit aggressive there because of the 3-month supply. And then up here, we then came and took out, I think that's an annual level here. So I had another alert for the possibility of a short off that, which would have been nice, but again, awkwardly came and took out the high first. So if anybody tried to hold it, they might have been stopped out. And then I had a final alert for a 2-month supply inside the 3-month up here. It's again not the best. I think it might have already tested on the lower time frames, but didn't get that quite that high. Similarly, then on the long side, I've had a long in here, which again decent bounce, but not back up to supply enough. This one, not so much. And then here, I was like, okay, this is a 3-month demand. It's got a low just going into it. Look for a stop handle of that 3-month test, which I think tested before it was a 3-month. So again, gave a good long move. hence then looking for the re-entry, but it's just obviously not ready to reverse. So this one failed, and then similarly here, the first weekly inside the 3-month has failed. So I guess what I see also here is if we're not getting the very quick reaction off the top of the zone, then there really is a very distinct possibility that it goes all the way back to the bottom of the zone. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, like I say, pound is not one of my strongest alerted pairs. Although I guess less bad than I thought. So I mean, you know, it's probably what 50-50 in here. Decent one there. 1, 2, 3. It's difficult because it depends what you consider a successful alert or not. You know, this has gone up for a whole day, so you know, again, gave a good scalp. By then, also would have made a 5-day supply, so I think it just came straight off that. And that's also why you need to do your own analysis, because I can't keep all the alerts updated all the time. And some of them all hit, and then that 5-day will confirm that night, for example. So then it becomes like a much less viable trade if it's made a supply immediately above where long alerts hit. Anyway, so this has dropped down. So now I don't know, I need more time on this. Like I say, I think, you know, there's the risk that we're going to continue straight down, because obviously the last 2 retracements have been very, very aggressive. But then this impulse up has been stronger than previous. So you need to remove all the to hide my session break lines. Some events, isn't it? Because we don't make it that easy to see on the video. Yeah, so that's the pound. Like, not as good as I would like for sure. And I think Euro pound's pretty much the same. Euro pound, I think I did make a bit of an error at one point. I think it was here. No, maybe not. Maybe it was a few months ago, actually. I think I didn't notice that at one point suddenly, yeah, I think maybe this was earlier. Yeah, that's the end of May. I didn't notice this had made a monthly demand because I wasn't on top of the charts enough. So when it retraced, I think I was still looking for the possibility of shorts to get back down to here, and it just tapped. So you can see there, it just tapped off that brown level, monthly demand, before very significant run. And also in this case, so you'll see in some of these charts when I've got green crosses like running all the way down, like I don't just put these on in the present, I only look at the most recent ones, but what I do have is it's ones that haven't been tested from previously. So this I would have had here, testing a monthly, never came back and tested it. This I would have had way back here to test the weekly, never came back and tested it. So Euro pound has been strong and has not come back as you know, the local entries. So again, sometimes when you look at these, just as a disclaimer, it looks like I'm very short biased on this, but that's actually not my intent. The euro yen is going to be a massive culprit for that. It looks like I'm very short biased, which I'm not. But I still put in alerts, even if we are in a big uptrend, because I want to go, you know, are we going to react at this level? What's it going to give us? But it means that basically none of my long entries have hit. That's why there's just shorts all over it. And then invariably what happens is exactly what happened here, that the first time one does hit is when it's actually reversed. And that's mainly because I'm just putting the high time frame alerts on, like I tend to. I put some 8 and 12 hour, but a lot of them are weeklies, particularly if I'm not that across what the chart's doing. So anyway, yeah, aggressive short here failed. And I think even there I probably would have been looking for a test down into that monthly level, but it didn't give it. And just kept going from there. That was, you know, a decent short there, but then Consolidate still went higher. Another retest short in here, again gave a small move down, but probably it made some sort of demand and it just wasn't ready to reverse. And it was reasonable to start looking for shorts around here. That's now it's flipped the level, but I guess there was you know, it's like I said, it's the top of an impulse down. I'm not sure what exactly I was looking for. Maybe it was just a weekly level retest over here. I've got with that black line. And then, yeah, the long would have failed, and then I had a short. So again, this I certainly know I disclaimed this short and said that, again, it was a big zone, so it could run a lot higher into it, but I was just being aggressive. And I also sort of said it wasn't a strong supply, I think, in the alert. So it's around this one, it's just run back through, and it's actually flipped that 3-day, it was a 3-day week supply, and it's now a 3-day week demand. I had to just miss my alert at the 4-hour at the top there. This isn't horrendous, actually. It's slightly better than the pound US one, but I mean, it's still only sort of 50-50 or so on the entries on that. Not the best tradable pair recently. Pound Aussie has been a bit nicer. I think it might have been a bit more challenging earlier in June with some of this mess. And yeah, so then decent short. So this is just an example of, I mean, you've got a sideways range that these aren't necessarily that high probability. So 12-hour supply in here, and I think I did say here, and there's an untested daily above. So again, gave a little scalp off there, then went up to the daily and did give a decent move down. And then similarly here, this is a new 3-week supply that's been made. Slightly wary of this because of all the stops it's leaving above here. So I put the same kind of disclaimer on that alert. There's a 4-day supply there, but I don't love the equal highs above. Equal highs. Don't love the equal highs. But it is a 3-week supply, so still worth looking for the possibility of shorts. And again, the challenge on a pair like this structurally is similar. It's holding, so it's just running a consolidation on top of this weekly demand. It had a 2 weekly stacked demands. If you've got two stacked demands like this, where you've got a week and then another week's been created just after, then what you do tend to find is that price will struggle to hold the top of the second one, and it's more likely to come down and test the level of the first. Just observational. But yeah, so it's still holding this, again, bigger picture bullish structure, and this is just still a consolidation through here, so we can't say we're bearish on this. However, once we've now started making a 3-week supply, then I become slightly more aggressive on the short side, and I think that's what happened here. It made a weekly supply here. I think maybe that was an aggressive alert off the weekly, the first one, and then the more refined one because it went higher in the zone. Yeah, so I've become more inclined to short once we make those higher time frame supplies above, but until it breaks demand, it's not really in a down structure. And then in this case, like in many, we've got a monthly demand right below. So even if it does break this, at what point it's in a macro downtrend, it's got to break a significant low. So if we say those are the up moves, so really it has to break down below this low for this to then be in a downtrend and to be confident of a short, a macro short. And it could take a year to do that, or 5 years. So anyway, this has also made a weekly supply immediately at the price, and actually had made it last week. And I was considering kind of aggressive shorts on this, but then I think I forgot to put one in. I think I was considering when it came up into this daily, and then I didn't get around to it. But yeah, they're not too bad on the pound, pound Aussie there. So that's some decent. I think the cross pairs have been a bit better than the majors because of that messing around the dollar's been doing, and also because of the tariffs and Trump comments that just moved the market within an unscheduled news moment. Has made these a lot more challenging for this first 6 months, and maybe we'll settle down for the rest of this term. We live in hope. Yeah, so I hope that helps for those, and yeah, so you can see some of the challenges. Moving on to the Aussie layout, Aussie US, Aussie CAD, and EURUSD. So start with Aussie US. And this is why I kept referencing this at the beginning. You can see this mess just made it incredibly hard to trade. And also what we had, so if we go up to the higher time frame, again, we had this, strong close at the end of last year, a strong bearish close. There's no yearly in there, so it's got a 6-month supply, which actually, in fact, hasn't quite got to yet. So even this could have the opportunity to go a little bit higher. I assume I've got an alert up there. But what we did have is we had a 3-month level, a 3-month level, and a 3-month level. And like those two lower ones are a lot potentially less valuable, but I leave the lines in just in case. Like, they're not things I would alert, but I like to have. The reason my charts are so busy is because I like to have all the information there, even if I don't trade it. And I've had people say before things like, that isn't supply. So they'll say, for example, they won't call this a supply because it hasn't broken the demand. Let's say, this is not the best example, but let's say. And I'm like, well, it's still supply For me, anything above price is supply, anything below price is demand. Whether or not you want to trade those price levels is based on other things you see on the chart, but there's still supply above, there's still people wanting to sell to you. And in fact, there's even demand above, although I tend to refer to it, as I just said, there's even demand above because people still want to buy when the price goes over a certain value. But that's obviously less common. People tend to want to buy the lows, or at least the institutions do, but retail traders tend to want to buy FOMO. But arguably there's demand above the price as well, but typically, anywhere above the price of people who want to sell for one reason or another, and anywhere below the price is where people want to buy. So I would never say this is not supply. You could say this is not a supply that I would trade for this reason, and that's why I talk about strong and weak supply and demand. This is a strong supply here, and it's had a really strong move off it. It's less strong when it comes back to test it on the next go, but it just took out the high a little bit and then still had a decent move off it, and it still arguably hasn't been able to get past that supply for now, since 2022. So that is a strong supply. Doesn't mean it's always going to work. Does a weak, will a weak one always fail? Will the strong one always work? Neither in either case. You just need to work out a strategy that you're gonna, like for me, I want clean zones. I want a clean zone that hasn't been tested already. If there's a zone that has been tested, then I'm looking for a swing failure off the previous test. But I want basically pretty much a clean zone, not messy. This is messy while I'll draw this. And I draw my zones differently. So the other thing is, if you don't follow me, you won't know. Like I draw, most people draw zones when they're talking about order blocks. They're following ICT, who I do not follow. Again, because of my perception of the charts that everything above is supply. For me, if I'm going to draw a zone, for example, on this 3-week chart, I would look at a higher time frame chart first. But for me, these 3 candles are all their 3-week supply on that chart, on that time frame. Other people, the ICT method is to draw only the last up candle before a down move. Again, that doesn't mean I'm going to trade the bottom of that 3-week, but I've seen enough reactions off the level to know that I want to include the whole lot. But again, that comes down to your own personal preference. I teach people the way I do it, but I'm not necessarily saying the way I do it is perfect or 100% right. But for me, it has worked better than using the other definition and that ICT uses. But if that works for him, that's fine too. So anyway, moving on. The Aussie has been an utter mess since, when's that? April? Yeah, so it was, so is that now like 5 months? Got some, but having said that, I have got some decent trades off it. The difficulty was, again, finding where that top was. The preferred top is up here at the 6-month level, but we had these 3 months. You can see all these, I think these are all 3-month, 2-month, 3-month levels that we had throughout, and all of those were causing resistance. So you can see again the value of looking at all those levels, even if they don't necessarily, whether or not you trade them, having them on your charts at this first 3-month level, which is back from 2023, did get some good reactions for shorts off it. I'm wondering if that noise outside is too loud for the stream. Kind of unavoidable at the moment. So yeah, there's that level worked, then this one didn't work so well, but the next one did. So that was a 3-month level a bit higher. Let me just push the window shut. Not that that's going to help too much. We'll close the window entirely, probably. Anyway, so on this, I had my bias wasn't I was more short biased, but I was still like, okay, we can long the lows, and particularly because by that stage, I think it was more difficult here, and I was more short biased in the first half of the year because of the major supply, and also because of the fact, obviously, we had this big move, and I thought this might come down and test somewhere a bit more deeply in there. And ignoring that sound. Hold on one moment. I am going to close the window entirely. Sorry about that. I'm back and have the opportunity to utilize the cigarette. What was I saying? Can't remember what I was saying now. Oh yeah, so yeah, I was more bearish on this earlier in the year because I thought we'd go down and test some previous levels. You know, we kept leaving all these stops below, so I was thinking, you know, come on, this has got to take out. I think I had trend line drawn in here. And then we did eventually come and take some of those stops, but again, this, you know, would have been preferable to take out those two. So I've still got that orange line in there for those equal lows there, which maybe we're going to head down there now. But I think once I realized that the dollar wasn't going to bounce in the earlier part of the consolidation, it did look like it was going to head down to the yearly, I then became like, well, okay, maybe we can look for some longs on this and maybe we're going to get up to that 6-month supply. Obviously still haven't quite got there. And the challenge, again, from a high time frame perspective, this is fine. You know, it's held this weekly supply. So that first alert I have, you know, would probably come in there, remains valid. You know, it's still holding that zone if you're trading based on the weekly supply. But from a scalp perspective, it's significantly harder because, you know, it came back down into demand, got a really nice long entry off the demand there, made a higher high, then got a short entry, a couple of short entries for retest, but still then went for another higher high. And then obviously typical markets hasn't gone back for a test for a short for me. But then, you know, others have. So New Zealand, I know I got a very nice short on a retest, and I think the equivalent level here, for example. So yes, you may not, but it's frustrating when you are watching something for that long going, this has got to reverse, this is going to come down and take those stops, and then it's really hard to get into. But overall, Aussie hasn't been that bad. You know, there's been one or two shorts, or there was actually one short there that wasn't perfect, but the longs were nice. That gave a decent move up, even if it didn't go up higher. Then a really nice, decent move off that, decent move there. And then finally on the last week, again, we've finally got the breakdown. So that's, I think on most of the charts, I have this entry from, when was it? End of July. Yeah, so the last week of July, we finally got that reversal. Or potential reversal with a bigger drop off supply. So I guess we'll see. So this one, you can see the weekly zone in here. So I think if you've noted the previous weekly zones, weekly supplies that I've talked about, the euro is very close, Aussie isn't far off, pound is a little bit higher, and obviously it's just coming down a little bit early now. Probably means the euro US is coming down as well. But all up, not too bad on Aussie US. Aussie CAD I think has also been pretty good. The same kind of mess, and this I think I've been putting in every single alert as well, particularly all the long alerts I've just been putting, you know, this is coming off a monthly supply, so this I think is a cleaner one but has taken a long time. So you can see this, when was that? The May candle came up into that zone, came down, it obviously would have given decent shorts at that time, but now it's gone back up and it's still in the zone, so it's just taking its sweet time. So again, the chop has been challenging. I don't think this has anything. On the yearly, it's already had a test of that zone. So the challenge with, probably mentioned this a bit already, but again, if a zone has already been tested, it's then like, you know, what is your bias? Do you still want to trade that again? Like typically I would certainly keep the zone in there until it's absolutely broken. But I try not to trade things on multiple tests of a level unless it's a clear swing failure. Because once the level's been hit, so this zone was created in 2022, this 2024 candle has come up inside the zone, it's come up fairly significantly high inside that zone, and it's had that reaction. So what it's telling you is that there were buyers who got trapped here, there were people who sold against those buyers, people who got out break even, people who sold, and it hasn't given a significant move down. Then it's also, you know, looking at that monthly chart, you can see, actually, I don't know which comparing the year is not ideal. So where are we, 2024? We go to the 3 months. Yeah. So it's had a decent move down already, and it's taken out the lows from 2023, 2022, but has still got a long way to go if it wants to take out this low, if it wants to look at that macro yearly supply. This is a yearly supply sitting inside another yearly supply, probably a 3 or 5 year supply as well, but unfortunately TradingView doesn't give those the highest time frames. Might be a good thing because there's not enough hours in the day. But anyway, I have been short biased on this. I have wanted this monthly supply to play out, at least to come down here, you know. So while the perfect world, you'll be looking for the lower low and have, that monthly downtrend continue. But when you've got a wick like this, it's very possible it's not going to come and take for a lower low when it's taken a whole load of stops below. Maybe it's going to want to go for stops above. But I kind of wanted something more than what it's given, at least down to here. Actually, I think maybe it did. No, it kind of already did. Anyway, yeah, the challenge of the sideways, because then I just start thinking of all the competing timeframes and which is the weekly winning. So I think this actually made a 3-week demand here. So I then was looking for longs, thinking maybe we get up to here, but we still didn't get that much higher. It's now flipped back and made a weekly supply, which it looks like it's rejected today. But all up, it actually hasn't been that bad to trade or to put alerts. Another one here, 12-hour supply again. Would have disclaimed it, saying it could go to the next 12-hour up or daily. Maybe that was up there. But that gave a decent short down into here. Hold on again. Let me remove my session breaks. I'm doing apply to all, but I think unfortunately it doesn't apply to every layout. Just applies to the charts on this layout. But yeah, 2 decent shorts there. Very nice long there. Bit of a scalp long there, not perfect, but again, shouldn't have been something that would stop anybody out. This one I definitely did put. There's a 12-hour supply and there's another 12-hour, 8-hour above that wasn't tested. So it did go through the first one up to the second one. Actually, I thought at that point it might break out here and go to the next zone up, but it didn't. And then it started breaking down again. Really nice short re-entries on those, and now we're back in this demand again. So I was a little bit in 2 minds I placed this one, this 4-hour zone here at the weekend, but it has made because it had made the weekly, this new weekly, but it may just come off the weekly and not go back up to there. But Mondays can be a bit tough because I put aggressive alerts on Mondays before, and move this zone. I put aggressive alerts on Mondays before, so for example, like here, and then it just, for the first couple of days, it'll play out the larger time frame zone, but it can go significantly higher inside it or lower inside it if it wants to before it plays out. But anyway, all up, not bad on Aussie CAD. I still like my bias, to play out. So we have coming off annual supply, then coming off a monthly, and then the larger monthly does make me think this should go down, and it might be a 2-month in there as well. Yeah, so again, not the best 2-month supply, but it's also in a 2-month supply. So like my bias really is still down on this until I see that 2-month broken. But now we've made a weekly supply. Maybe it's more likely we're going to get a better drop on this. EURUSD. He's had very big moves this year, and it's been just trying to figure out at this point, are we going to get another year or 2 of sideways up here, or are we going to start retracing that because there's finally come up and filled some of this COVID gap that's been there since 2020, and still has a lot further it can go if it wants, but it has given some relatively decent trades on this, I think, as well. Once it's slowed down. So my strategy always works better when the price is moving slow. Like if it's trending like this, it will just run straight through all the zones if it wants to with no pullbacks at all. But on the plus side is if it does do that, then there aren't any entries to be had, unless you're looking at the 2-minute chart or something. If you look at something like this on the 8-hour, the 4-hour had some consolidations, but there was no break of structure on any decent time frame to make you short this. So even if I had short alerts going here, you just stay away from them because it's not giving any sign of it's only up here that it starts to give a sign that it might be reversing, and then you can start looking into zones for shorts. So what do we have here? So again, short here, long here, pretty nice. We're just having what potentially is a correction of this down move. And I say potentially because this also made a monthly demand here. So I had the monthly alert actually went here for monthly demand. That's why I've just re-put it. That's why I've left the crossing. It didn't get down low enough. And sometimes I put the alerts a little bit higher. If I do see something like in this case, it had this daily demand that hadn't been tested. So if I do see something that could bounce the price just above a zone, then I'll put the alert a bit higher. So this alert did go off, but it didn't reach the monthly level. Now has reached the monthly level. So this is going to be an interesting one to see if it's going to get a decent reaction off here. So the first couple of days has been good for sure. Again, on the short side, it's been good. This one was another one I disclaimed at the end of last week. I think there's a 2-day and a 5-day supply in here, and I feel like it's at least gone through the 2-day. It might still be in 5-day. Yeah, so it's still inside this larger 5-day. I've just deleted the color off it, and it's made a new weekly demand. Correct that, new 3-week demand. So I was torn again about whether I wanted to be aggressive and put a long alert right there, but I ended up being slightly more conservative, thinking maybe it's going to reduce, so fill some of that gap below before it goes to higher zones. Yeah, so this one I disclaimed as saying this was a low probability or potentially low probability since we're now coming from monthly demand. So my bias on this is wrong for now. And yeah, so look for re-entries on long side and then just be conscious when we get for short entries. Yes, maybe you're going to get a reaction, but we are coming from a much higher time frame demand now. And then so we put in this 3-week on top of it with that really strong close. It would be nice to get a retrace back to here. But overall, yeah, not only a handful of alerts on this, but I think all are pretty good except for the current one. The current one was disclaimed anyway. Pretty happy with that. So that's the Aussie layout. I will try, I'm thinking just some time-wise, I've already done 50 minutes. I'll try and be a little bit quicker on the rest of the pairs because I don't want this to be like a 10-hour stream or 10-hour video, and I've kind of made all the comments I need to. New Zealand dollar, exactly the same as Aussie, really. I think the supply on this is a bit cleaner. What we've got, maybe it's a 6-month. Yeah, so it had the 6-month supply, it's already tested it and dropped significantly off that, and now it's made a 3-month off the back of that, so it's just dropping from there. So I think it might be, it's just made a 3-month. So the difficulty, similar to Aussie dollar, is it obviously had some reactions immediately off the level here, but it has run higher inside, and it was cleaner than Aussie, though. It was a bit nicer to trade, and I probably should have focused on it a bit more. I think I got similar entries to Aussie, so an aggressive long here, which didn't get very far, and then a decent long there. This short was a little too aggressive, so that wasn't the best entry, and this long was okay. I don't know, actually, that might have been on daily zone, so it might have broken the zone there, but at least again, a bit of a consolidation. And then finally, short here, decent move, and then a very decent move off that one. And this was kind of interesting, actually. I was reluctant to, I don't know why I eventually ended up alerting this one. I don't like it when we have, like I say, this stacked kind of rundown, because quite often you can go up to the highest zone in that chop. And I guess I'd already tested up here. It also had a little 8-hour up here, but anyway, I think obviously I threw in the alert. Maybe I just saw something at the time that was complement with everything else, but that had a really nice reaction. And then like everything else, I had the looking for the higher low long here, thinking this has just been consolidating so long, and then finally it's broken down. Similar to all the others, has new weekly supply, so I've got new alerts. Aggressive on the open of the weekly, and less aggressive if it goes higher inside the weekly. But this, again, my bias is now more down to hopefully fill some of this gap and come back and maybe test this monthly level, or at least these weekly levels. Not sure what my macro view of this was. I mean, the macro view is really down. Well, like, that's what my macro view is, I guess. Not really. Sort of a giant descending triangle. Whether it's going to fall off the cliff, a cliff or pump, remains to be seen. I certainly know I got decent long entries down here of taking out stops, but I think it's still got another low here that it didn't quite take out. So possibly we do get that move down off this 3-month supply to at least take out this low. If not, do get back down there. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. There's a lot of zones in between. But all up, not too bad on the New Zealand dollar either. Maybe 60–70% on that. Euro New Zealand is not dissimilar to Euro Aussie. This has been less, I've been less keen on this because it didn't come down, it hasn't come anywhere close to monthly demand. So then the challenge on this is maybe it's not going to get back there. It doesn't have to come and test here. And that's what people say. When I put alerts on charts and I'm like, oh, this is an area I would look for longs, people always think that means, or people who don't follow me think that means, oh, the price is going to go there. So they want to short it all the way down to here, which would be nice, and you could. It's an option. But just because I say I want to long there doesn't mean the price has to go there. If the price is very strong, it could just keep going up from here and not come back down here for another year. So yeah, don't assume that means it's going to come there. It just means it's the next clean level that I would look for a long on, clean or high time frame. I was told maybe about putting one here for the 3 week, and I just thought, well, if it does start running down, then maybe it's going to fill more of that gap. But in this case, I'd already had the alert for 5-day demand here, or 4-day demand. It's come down deeper inside, but actually it's held it where EURUSD hit the monthly. Also had trend line stops here, so I'm still inclined to think maybe this will come down. But obviously it's still, in the grand scheme, is quite bullish, or it's a bullish consolidation sitting on top of this weekly here. And alerts-wise, again, short this huge zone here, so I don't know how easy that would have been to get into with your stop all the way up here if you traded the daily, but hopefully, if you got traded the lower time frame on this, that would have given at least a decent move down, then a really nice long there. Not a bad short here, didn't get very far, and then I went up into 4-hour supply up there. I thought I had an alert for that 4-hour supply actually. So maybe I've lost a cross or something somewhere along the way. And then similar here to EURUSD that I just said, I think this has come into a 5-day supply. I think I didn't disclaimer this as much, but it's come into the 5-day supply, and in fact come up very, very high in and has taken out the wick. And of this 4-hour, and then I re-alerted the 4-hour later because I thought this is such a big up move on Friday. I thought we could get some retracement off one of the higher zones. But yeah, it doesn't seem to want to come down as yet. But again, not too many alerts on this, but 3 of the 4 have been okay, or now the 5th 5 is still potentially in progress. In fact, even the 4th one is still arguably in progress. And then finally on this layout, we have dollar Swiss franc, which really bears no resemblance to this layout, but you've got to put them somewhere, and I don't want to have millions of separate layouts. I've already got, I think, 8 or 10 on the FX side. Dollar Swiss franc, so mostly I left this alone. So I was looking back in June for the higher low here, and then if it was going to give another higher low, really nice short, decent short there, and then obviously didn't give the higher low here, and that was similarly hinging on whether the dollar was going to give the bounce when it did, and it didn't. So it went down deeper. I didn't try and catch the low on this because I think, the Forex.com chart is much worse than some of the others. I think I put in some levels that show up more cleanly on Amanda because I think all of the charts had these wicks from back in 2015. There was some drama with the Swiss franc, but the wicks are obviously at varying lengths. So I've left. Well, that should be down there actually. So I do have an alert for that weekly. No, apologies, I was thinking it was a weekly demand, but in fact it's now a supply. I was watching in this zone, but because of the wicks, it was not something I alerted, so I just wanted to leave this alone. Well, the only other trainer that I follow also is, I think, predicting a lot lower on this. I'm not sure based on what, because while he gives levels, he doesn't really say why he's giving levels quite often, so it makes it hard. Yeah, then when it had bounced, and again, when it looked like the dollar was going to bounce, I then became more interested in looking for longs on this. So I had a long in there, which was decent. And then this one, at this point, it was just a challenge. So it hit the weekly level and used that to reject 12-hour supply at the weekly level. I was just hoping this would get one more push up into there, but the dollar just started correcting sooner. And then similarly, this would have been a nice long entry, but I think I didn't look for longs because it had already had the test here. Again, I feel like maybe I did alert down here. Oh, you know what? I think I actually did have an alert here. I think once it came there, I had an alert, but we didn't come back and get the test there. And now I've moved the alert up. So like the dollar, this has made a weekly demand, 5-day demand at that level. There's a big gap here. So again, I alerted the level, but it could fall deeper inside. But not the best here. Or again, maybe 50-50, so a good long, a less good long, a bad short, a decent short, and then we'll just see what the reaction is. So it's similar to what I want on what I was talking about on the dollar. It's like, is this now going to take off? It's left a lot of stops up here that it could go for, but it's still under weekly supply. So I still want to trade both directions until proven otherwise, or at least alert both directions, and then just see what the market's looking like as and when this gets here. Would have been kind of nice if this had tested the low before running back up today, though. But yeah, so a bit more 50-50 on the dollar Swiss franc, and decent on New Zealand, and decent on yeah, both the New Zealand pairs are pretty, on the whole, pretty good. And the ones that have failed have tended to go through pretty quickly. So I wouldn't really give the opportunity to get in anyway, unless you got in with absolutely no analysis on a FOMO. Then Japanese yen layout. So firstly, dollar yen. So all the yen pairs have been difficult since the carry trade failed. Or they're becoming easier. In fact, I said that's harsh to say they're being difficult, but they had some large zones. So what we had on all the yen pairs, I think, had this 6-month demand. I think they all bounced on it. Maybe Aussie yen wicked through and then closed back above. So it's got the 6-month demand here. It's got an untested 6-month a bit below. And then didn't make a 3-month supply, but did kind of just close below this to make 2-month supply. And also has an offset monthly now here. So we had that drop from the carry trade unwinding. I think that was, yeah, that would have been it. Then we had a strong retest back up, very nice and easy back up into monthly supply. It had monthly demand, it tried to bounce and then just went straight back through it. So on the higher time frame, this is still holding the 6-month demand, but you can see we're kind of on the third test of it. So it's really is at some point supply and demand. So we can say 6 months, 6 month, from the first test, what your expectation should be that we're going to take out the high. Excuse all the extra lines if I'm another chart of history. So your expectation is we test here and we take out the high. If it then doesn't do that on the first wave, then you've got to consider either it's consolidating and it's going to have another go at it, or it's ready to break down, ready to break that 6 month demand. So once you've got to the third test of it, it's then tenuous. So my bias on this has been more mixed. I was going to say to the downside. So with downside should certainly, well, we're in monthly supply, and then I think we had a 3-week, 2 weeks inside it. So I had a couple of more aggressive alerts. I was looking for longs at the bottom, and it's, again, the dollar yen can be slightly more independent of what the dollar's doing. Like, it will follow the dollar, but then also the yen can give it big moves for all the yen and the cross pairs. And that's kind of what's happened here. Yeah, we had a drop on the dollar on Friday, obviously, but then we also had a pump on all the yen. So all the yen pairs had a very, very big drop, whereas you don't see the same on the other cross pairs. So there was this sort of a double whammy on this chart on Friday. I'm not sure actually what the news was. I don't even know if there was specific news. I know there was a Bank of Japan interest rate release, but I think that was either last week or maybe even, I don't think it coincided with Friday. I think it might have been earlier in the week. Anyway, still it hasn't been too bad to trade. Again, I just didn't put much in there throughout June and July because it was unclear. And once you've got zones here that have already been tested, then chances are it's going to run through them. So we had a nice long entry in June, and then like a scalpy one after that, but it did come back down deeper. I think, again, I was hoping for this to drop into a clean zone, but we didn't get it. And then a run up, and then a nice short entry there to get the last bit of that run, as well as shorting the top. That's the monthly one. I think I referred, no, earlier, excuse me. Now I'm really hot now. I've closed the window and the noise appears to have stopped. Decent short entry here, and then back up, and then finally into this monthly supply where I would have wanted the bigger short. Didn't give a nice entry, unfortunately, so it did have a reaction immediately off the level and then went higher. And I think I'd said in the alert that maybe it would come and take these two highs out into weekly supply, but unfortunately it did come close, but didn't get quite as high enough to actually trigger that alert or trigger my interest. But yeah, that was basically expected. for it to come down off monthly supply there. And now it's a question of, how much deeper is it going to go? The chop here, the trend line stops. I've got an alert here. There's a daily or a 2-day demand in here, but I'm inclined to think that this is probably going to run lower. But that doesn't really tally with what my thoughts are on the dollar. But maybe the yen will drive that move if it does run lower. And or there could be the timing aspect of it. So while I want this to run lower, maybe a dollar pump will take this back up to that level and then we get it. Like it doesn't have to happen immediately. Just now we're coming down, doesn't have to suddenly drift down. The price moves in waves. It doesn't move in straight lines normally, except if there's a carry trade unwinding, like here. Anyway, I again have the and remind myself to do this at the start of the session rather than throughout the session breaks. Yeah, so all up, not too bad on dollar yen either. Could have been better. Again, hard to get the top or hard to get the actual bigger move reversals. Nice one here in late June though. We'll do Euro Yen next because that's been the hardest one. So as I was saying I think on the Euro New Zealand Aussie earlier, this is just something that just hasn't come back to test anywhere. And in fact, when I look at it now, I think it has tested some decent zones. If I'd been aggressively looking at the 12-hour and the 8-hour and trading this more actively myself, in fact, it did come back and trade 12-hour, give a 12-hour entry here quite nicely. But the problem is, once something has gone up a lot, it's hard to know, when it's going to come back down again. So this, I think we had this, we do have this big 3-week supply here. So I think I was looking for shorts at least there, when it started to come into that supply, and then similarly here in case it was just going to take out this high but still hold this zone over here. But obviously it's just run through it. So yeah, it looks like I'm very short biased, and I think I am short biased because we are coming to the start of a big drop. But I think at least each of these alerts, that's why I say I've disclaimed them, I've kind of said, obviously this is still going up. I think I've certainly said, I think this one, there were two-day supplies, I believe, on this. Or maybe a daily and a 2-day, or there's a 2-day here and then another 2-day here. So I said that it could come up into the top one. But again, some of these have given decent, little scalps. So we've got, a couple, those two were okay, this one less okay, this one less okay, and that one less okay, but this one also decent. This one is a black cross, but mainly because it was supposed to be a daily supply, and I think I just put it in too early and it hadn't confirmed. It did actually give a bit of a reaction, but then went up to a high. This alert has gone, did go, but again, didn't quite hit that 2-day level. And I don't like it when it does that, because then I kind of think, is it going to come back and take it out on the swing failure? And it starts to make me nervous of putting in, aggressive shorts for a lower high, or vice versa, a higher low, without when it hasn't quite hit a level that I want. But then I also know there are lots of different brokers, and this came down very hard. So this 2-day level may not be the same on all brokers. And short of, again, going to all the brokers and having a look and finding out exactly what that level is or what the average level is across all the brokers, I haven't got the patience for that. I think I did do it with dollar yen over the weekend, actually. I think I looked, or one of these, I think I looked to see whether this high, I think it might have been this actually, I looked to see if this high had actually hit the monthly level, because it hadn't quite hit on this, when I transposed the level. So you see there's actually no level here. This is transposed from another broker. And I think the other broker had hit that level, whereas this chart, Forex.com, didn't quite hit the same price. So anyway, this is now finally seeming like it's going to give a correction, but got a daily demand there, or 2-day demand there, and a daily here. And I think I had this alert from before, and I haven't moved it. I'm torn now. When it's coming down, starts to come down more aggressively, and certainly if it runs through this whole consolidation, I think I might keep that alert there just to see, because if it runs through that just very quickly in one consolidation, then it might even give a scalp bounce. But this is not an ideal long level if this is fully reversing, obviously. It can reverse that whole move down to the start of it if it wants to, and is liable to if you look at previous price moves. So very 50-50 on the run up, and really not giving, that the entries that probably shouldn't have been taken. I don't know if anybody would have followed those, but obviously when you've got a run like this, I'm alerting the high time frame or possible supply levels. But until you really want to see a higher time frame change of structure to be looking, even now isn't really an ideal change of structure, because it hasn't, I think it's broken any daily demand yet. It's broken a daily up here, in fact. And it has now made some significant supply. So then you can start looking. So this is the kind of final, that's when you should be looking for your entries, either here or up in there, if you were being more conservative, and you would have missed because it didn't test high enough. But so I'd have the alert below, and then the alert for the less aggressive entry if it comes back, if it does want to go higher before reversing. And then similarly, I've also got an alert still back for that 2-day level if it does come back and take out that high. But we'll just see a bit more PA on this. But yeah, obviously that doesn't look great and didn't come back for any long entries. Pound yen was a lot better, but like the pound itself now is just horrible. So like all the other yen pairs I said, they're coming off 6-month demand at the low, which is great, but it's had 1, 2, 3 hits in it. It has made a 3-month demand. This giant brown zone here, it's made a monthly inside it. So let's just show those. They're not decent zones. These are zones, in fact, I could very easily see flip. But the challenge is I don't like trading against them. So you can see the 6-month down here, similar to dollar yen, it's come back down inside it. Only once, in fact, in this case. It didn't, it could make a 6-month supply if it does drop for the rest of the year, but that's way off. It's got 3-month demand here at the moment. If it closes back below this level, it might make an easy 3-month supply. So I think I probably, in the bigger picture, I would be looking for shorts on this, but on the macro, it's not ready yet. So at the moment, we've got a monthly demand here, which was already tested. So I have alerted that again. I think there was a 3-week demand and 1 month retest. There's a new 3-week in there. So while I am still bullish on this, on the immediate structure, I'm pretty conscious that this now could start retracing similar to this. It's up in a major supply from historically there. It's taken out this high. It's still above that high, to be fair, that previous high. So yeah, a higher time frame, I feel like this is probably going to turn bearish, but at the moment it's not, and certainly monthly it's not, and 3-week, etc. it isn't either. The weekly maybe is turning a bit more bearish here. We're coming back down now for a second test of weekly demand here. And then I just want to see the reaction on that monthly a bit lower. So like I said, it's going to be a second test of that monthly, so we'll see. On the alerts side of things, this has actually been, I think, decent. This has been one of the better ones. So yeah, a couple of shorts in here. This one less good. The swing fail short, a couple of decent swing fail shorts. So the retest shorts have been a bit harder. Again, just trying to find where the top is. When it's grinding up like this, you can look at the trend line and go, I want this to take all the stops on the trend line, but it doesn't mean it has to. And it can continue to grind for a long time before it does, if it really wants to. Had a really nice hit on 3-week supply here, taking out that high. But as you saw on, the euro yen, that just kept grinding higher and higher. In this case, it's now dropping, but we do have this 3-month demand. So just be a little bit careful of this if you are trading it down in the hope it's going to take out all these stops. That's a distinct possibility. But just be aware it's in 3-month demand, and then has this monthly coming in a bit lower. But yeah, all up on the alerts on the long side has been pretty good. So long there, and then a follow-up long. And it came back deeper into demand, decent long here. Took out the high just a bit, and then a really nice short. And then for the final reversal, a really nice short off that 4-hour supply at the top. Had quite a nice clean structure here. It was still aggressive because it was still potentially in an uptrend, but leaving all these stops up here and an untested 4-hour supply at the top gives a good solid setup. And then I think now has a new daily supply in there, so I have alerted that. It's got a weekly lower, so you can see on the new alerts that I put in from the end of last week or over this weekend, I've done a collection of some more aggressive and some less aggressive. So to see what happens if and when we get back up there. particularly if it hits the monthly demand first on this. That will be interesting. And then finally on this layout, we've got Aussie Yen. Again, nice on this, very short biased since we've come up into this. So this one has been cleaner than the others in that it did actually hold the 6 months demand on the first test, and then I think actually we made a double bottom. I think it came very, very close, making a double, or at least close to a double bottom, equal lows down here. But then it did close back below, creating 6 months supply. So I was looking for shorts on this, my bias was bearish. It's got a 2 month supply up here that I already tapped into. I remember getting some decent shorts off that earlier in the year. So when I say I want a clean zone, this is really what I'm talking about. It's when, when you probably clearly at the top, you had a strong move down off it, it's bounced, it's had some consolidation, it's rejected again, closed back below, and then it just tests back into that zone to get a second wave down. And it's that second wave. Once it's done an ABC, you might get a DE or you might get a trend reversal, but really you want to be trying to get in on the BC. The A is still guessing. So shorting here is still guessing. That's the A wave. But then you can long off the bottom by all means. And then you want to try and get in for this second move down. And that can be a zigzag or a triangle. Like typically if you look at Elliott waves, like I don't know Elliott waves in detail, but I do look at whether it's going to be a zigzag or a triangle. Just have some water. Like I'm going to start coughing. Yeah, so that's the sort of the more confident move you want. Then you can look for a DE, but at this point, then it may start doing a bigger correction of that whole bit ABC down and or going back into the trend direction that you're looking at originally. But anyway, that's on this. So this is why I've been short biased on this. I was a little bit early on shorts here. That's a lower time frame so we can see a bit better. Early on shorts here, but fine, like looking for a lower high at this point, or I can't remember if that was a retest of this zone or a lower high after this first drop down, that's fine. But then you need to be conscious of what's created in the interim. So this created a weekly demand. So I then put an aggressive alert for a long. You can short here, and that's by all means like long immediately. Took some real time, but it was a really nice long entry ultimately. And then they got the initial reaction off the 6 month supply there. And then it's pushed up higher inside it. So I think we've got a weekly and then various. We've still got various on the zones. And obviously this 6 month supply is a huge zone. It can still go significantly higher. But in this case, has been reasonably nice and is giving at least a decent reaction immediately off this start of this zone rather than pushing way higher inside. Towards the end of last week, it looked like it was going to create a weekly demand. It was very close to creating a weekly demand, but on Friday it just got annihilated and ended up creating a weekly supply. Also got a daily supply a bit below, so I've alerted again for if you get a reaction off the bottom there, but be conscious there's a weekly higher above. Like the other were like pound yen. I'll call all these stops down here like pound and euro yen. In fact, so whether it's going to come down through all this and take all those stops, I'm not sure. I'm just conscious of this because of the 6 month supply. So I don't really want to be more aggressive on longs on this. And also if the Aussie dollar itself is coming down, the Aussie dollar has been quite affected by tariffs. I think that was one comment I wanted to make earlier, that while all the majors do tend to move together, there have been some discrepancies, and I think that's part of the reason Aussie's been slightly different as well because of the tariffs, which is kind of a new thing. While they move together when they're being driven by the dollar, the tariffs have put a new slant on it, which has then driven, for example, Aussie and CAD, which I think are commodities-based currencies. They've moved slightly more independently than normal. So New Zealand hasn't followed Aussie quite as much, and then Aussie hasn't followed Euro and Pound quite as much as it has previously. Similarly, pounds had its own challenges, so that's also to some extent doing its own thing, but that's normal anyway. But yeah, anyway, so if we get the Aussie US wants to come and take all its stops out, then Aussie yen, in fact, probably is the better trade because it has a lot more stops and a lot more chop through here, so it's probably much less likely than the Aussie US to bounce. So you can keep an eye on that, but yeah, this I think is probably the best pair, best of the bunch for alerts. And then moving on to the Canadian pairs. How are we going for time? 1 hour 20. Hopefully I can get on only under 2 hours, and then I'll timestamp it, and at least you can jump around if you're not interested in the whole thing. But like I say, it does help me doing this, so if anyone watches, great. If they don't, I don't really care, because it helps me thinking about it and talking it through. Dollar CAD, nice swing failure of the high up here, and then it's come back down. I think we've actually got an annual demand on this, so I think the confluence on this and the dollar hitting at the same time was nice. So I think I was looking for longs on this. Again, being conscious it can go deeper inside the zone if it wants. Hasn't left any decent supply above on any high time frame supply. There's a 3-week right here, so it did have, I think, a short entry on there, and it's got a 3-week up the top. But at the moment, this is still two things here, I think. So we're still in an uptrend, we're on annual demand. So that makes me want to be long biased. However, the swing failure of high and this nasty, like I've seen these consolidations, this isn't like an accumulation, manipulation, distribution. So I have seen these over here, actually, you can see a very similar example. It's gone sideways, it's wicked up, and then it's just taken out the whole consolidation. So a little uncertain here as to whether this was going to run all the way back through. The difference obviously now is that this has annual demand, whereas over here, did we have anything? So it came down before even confirming a 6-month. It did have 2-month or 3-month demand in there. Yeah, it had a 3-month demand, so it did give a reaction off the 3-month. So it is possible we're still going to in the same spot here. So we'll look at the lower time frame. So here where we got a bounce, we got 2 months of up, September, October, and then it dropped for the rest of the year. So it's possible that this is going to do the same. So it's from a pattern perspective, I don't love that. So while I predominantly use supply and demand and don't trade against it, you have to be, in FX, you really need to be conscious of the patterns, because some of the patterns and the structure of not making higher highs and taking stops and things like that. The difficulty with the taking stops, though, is that I never quite know how to approach, is that, yes, we've taken stops up here, but then also at this low we took stops. So does that mean we don't, like, it doesn't necessarily, if we hadn't taken stops at the low, then you could say, okay, yeah, this is going to come down. I mean, it's broadly is actually, in fact, close to being triple equal lows, but then so is this. I mean, essentially it's still in a range, but I don't think you can use the same argument that it's going to come and take these stops because it's taken those stops when it's taken the ones before. Anyway, if that makes sense. But yeah, so the difficulty here is we're in annual demand. I want to be long biased, but we have a swing failure of the highs, and then you can see what it can do in this kind of pattern where it can just bounce in this case. And sometimes I've seen this come just straight through this middle zone and not care at all. I think something wrecked me doing that last year. I think it was Aussie US or something. Had a big breakout and then just ran straight back through it. Let's look at what the alerts have actually done. Can't remember much on this. So I do remember I had the annual alert for the annual demand at the lows, and then I was looking at what's this weekly supply in here. So we did get a reaction. I think it was a weekly supply in here. Did get a reaction, went a bit higher. Then similar to dollar Swiss franc, I had the sort of aggressive, like, is this going to just start running immediately from here, particularly after that initial candle? And in this case, it did give a decent trade off there, but then obviously came all the way back to the start. And I think I was still nervous there that, again, still retaining that downtrend, that this was then going to, there's a 2-3 day demand a little bit lower that it hadn't. So I thought maybe this could come down in here, but then it didn't. And then similarly here, again, we just got higher lows off that. There's now left trend line stops. I seem to remember dollar's done that before. I'd like to see what happened. I think I remember dollar doing that and thinking, oh, it's going to come back for them, then it didn't. And then anyway, I haven't done anything since then because I just wanted to see what was going to happen. And then I'd left this 3-week supply alert in up here. I said in the alert, I said it was a 2-week that was already tested, but it's held anyway as a 3-week. I kind of had that orange line thinking maybe it could just take out that high, so that's pretty nice. So it's given a nice move down. Like dollar and dollar Swiss franc and dollar yen, and not dollar yen, so like dollar and dollar Swiss franc, this now has this new weekly demand, but again, a whole big green run. So whether it's going to bounce off the top, I'm not sure. And then it's got a 3-day inside it. But hopefully this won't retrace all the way back down to the bottom. And if it does, I'll probably look for a lower low. But like, I want to see strength on this if the dollar's going to start playing out this yearly demand properly. Else, maybe we're still in a kind of corrective structure Just gone up for a test, and we're going to get one more move before something like that. Anyway, we'll see. So I've gone for a, again, like dollar Swiss franc, I think for a possible more aggressive short entry to get a lower high on this, but we'll see, because obviously that's kind of pretty counter that major low. Overall, we're only, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 entries on that, and all of them are decent, so that's pretty good. It's the other sign, like, I think, I guess, when I'm not overly aggressive. The other thing I do, which you see illustration on dollar yen, is particularly if I'm not actively trading myself somewhere on dollar yen, on euro yen, is when an alert hits, I relatively quickly set the next one. So as soon as this alert hits, I'll then go, okay, I'll drag this cross up for the next level and just set a new alert. And then I'll come back to this later to see if it reacted. But so I'm not necessarily doing full analysis every single time, particularly in a situation like this where it could go all the way to the top like it has, and then front run me, or it could reject here, or it could reject here, or it could reject on the 3 week. At some point I expect this to give a bigger correction. And in this case, it happens to have gone all the way to the top, which sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't. So it's unavoidable, but I do just sometimes pull the entries up and down. But sometimes when I give them more thought, or when I'm more careful about it, like on dollar CAD, then you get that sort of higher probability or better outcomes on the alerts. EUROCAD's actually been pretty good as well. Maybe all the CAD pairs have been good. Nice long here, nice long here, nice long here. Short, I think I was looking for a swing fail of something on that. Yeah, some significant highs here and then some significant highs here. So in that short, I was looking for a swing fail, and it did have a bit of a reaction. I went higher first and then just came back down to 12-hour demand. Then I flipped back to long because I was like, okay, well, maybe we're going to go for this upper high. And obviously, just a bit awkward, it hasn't quite made the short entries on this. Nice short there, but pounded back up really quickly. So that actually was a decent short. But yeah, it was very, very quick, so I don't know if anybody could have taken that. And then similarly here, I was just trying to be more aggressive on the longs in the hope we were going to get up to this level, but again, didn't quite get there. Now on this, we've got a daily supply there, which I think the alert went on Friday on that, has slightly front run it. This one I was waiting for quite a long time actually to maybe come back and test this monthly demand down here, and then on Friday I kind of thought this is too conservative and we should bounce before that. So I threw an alert for this 12-hour demand. It's come a bit deeper inside it, but it still held that zone, and it's come and tapped the 3 week level again, which was already tested here. But yeah, this is I don't think I really have a high time frame bias on this particularly. I think it's just grinding up. Yeah, it's grinding up. I would kind of like it to take out that high still, I think. And then just a question of whether it just keeps going, but you're really looking at. Yeah, I'll have to start putting some more zones in if we do go higher, but like provisionally, we're looking at taking out this high here and then the next high, and then I'll have to start putting more zones in. I haven't got anything major drawn in. There isn't. I don't think there's any. Yeah, so we had an annual demand here, which we tested multiple times and then wick through, and then it's just running off that. So it would be nice if we get a bit of a move higher to take out the annual supply here, and then we'll just see. 6 month demand. I do remember being bullish down here for the 6 month demand. So that's really what can happen, even if it's not a strong 6 month demand, which this wasn't when it confirmed. And it took a year or so to do it. Is this 6 months? Yes. So it felt like that long. But yeah, so it took 23, 24 to do it. But you have to, that's why I have all my zones colored on my charts, because I would forget, like if I didn't have that on there, I would completely forget after a year and a half that we were actually in a 6 month demand, that my buy should still be doing PR. We've got a 3 month demand down here. And so yeah, this is still 2 months just above. And now we've got a local month. So I'm still obviously very much bullish on this, on the macro. I would like it to take out these highs and then we'll see. So I'm bullish, but again, cautiously bullish, knowing that we're now in a considerable resistance area from previously. But for now, much lower time frame. We have that monthly demand down there. We have a 3 week, which we tapped into again on the last week candle. And then we've got a lot of trend line stops. So we'll have to see if this is not best monthly demand, so it may not hold, but that's kind of where I'd next look for a long entry on this. Now, possibly you could look for a long entry here. I think I was toying with that idea of looking for a long here at the weekend, but I think the 5-day supply has made me a little bit put off. So we've got so not only we have a 5-day supply that we're coming off here, we've also, it was the second test on this 3-week here, and we've got an untested monthly. So slightly more tentative, and all these stops. So I think that monthly, hopefully I've put lots of trend line stops in that. So certainly I would, if you do come down here, I'd expect a wick somewhere in this area. So I won't be looking to blind you long on the apex of the triangle there. This is that very common accumulation distribution pattern, is when you have a triangle. I show this a lot on Ripple, and it just runs straight through the triangle. So it's entirely possible that this does actually go straight back down to the 2-month demand down there, and I think there's a 3-month, 2-month and 3-month a little bit lower all the way down here. So just be cautious on this, but keep an eye on it if and when it gets down there. But overall, I think all the alerts on this have been pretty good, and I was more aggressive with longs, hoping for that final push, but from a scalp perspective, they're fine. So I'm pretty happy with that. Do that. What's Bitcoin doing? Just going sideways still. Been a good day to do this because Bitcoin is basically doing not very much at all. PoundCAD's another one that was in a major supply, I think similar to Pound US and the others. Quickly look at the high time frame on this. So it has made an annual demand, which it hasn't quite tested there. Really need to see if TradingView, let me have a quick look. Has TradingView actually updated this add custom interval? Yeah, so you can't select years here. So you can't add a custom interval for years, which will be really nice. Anyway, so it's certainly made an annual level there, but it hasn't quite tested it. Actually, I'm on 6-month chart. Sorry, it was an annual level there. It hasn't quite tested it. It's got a 3-month demand, which it has tested already, and it's pushed up from there to make the higher high. And overall, it is still a monthly supply here. So I'm overall bullish on this, but due a decent pullback, I think. It's a little bit choppy here for me. So yeah, I'm a little bit torn on that. It's already tested that 3 months, so I'd expect it potentially to take out that wick. The other thing this has done as well is created a monthly supply. It's not the best monthly supply because it's this red candle here, and so obviously it needs to close below that to actually create a monthly supply. Really, it's like a monthly sideways range. But I tend to give weight to what's more recent in the range. So while this is also a monthly demand as well as a monthly supply, the monthly supply is what's confirmed more recently. So I'm now more inclined to be short biased on this, potentially to take out that low. And then again, just all these stops below. So I think for now on this, we might get a bounce somewhere in here. I think, there's 5 days and 4 days and various things coming off the monthly at the high there. I'd be more inclined just to leave this alone until I see a bit more from it. And it was one of the ones I've gone slightly more aggressive. So I've got the weekly supply right in the start here, and with the new monthly, I kind of thought it's worth looking for a more aggressive short on this. We also had an alert go for the low on Friday, but it didn't quite hit that 12-hour level. So I've reset that alert, 12-hour and daily demand, and there's an 8-hour inside it. So we'll just see if we get that higher low. Like, I did want to be bullish on this. Now back here, we got longs. And then I really wanted this level to be tested here or even here. The fact it's now here, and bad drawing, having had all this correction in the middle, I don't know. Like, it's a bit too long. Like, because it's only a 12-hour, like if it was a weekly zone, I'd be less concerned. But it's been so long since it's hitting this level, I'm slightly more wary of it, and even more so now it's got this monthly supply above. On the alerts front, so this one obviously got run through eventually, but did give a bit of a scalp off there. Nice one for a swing fail of that high here, and then a really nice one for the retest. Nice long entry in the middle, and another nice short, and then that long if you got that on Friday. So again, all up pretty good on this. Not unhappy with those alerts. And then we'll see. Yeah, I just don't know if we're going to run. So many of the charts look like this, where they've left zones up here that are untested. They're coming into demand, and I just don't know if we're going to get a giant candle, and it's really going to hinge on whether the dollar decides it's going to retrace and make a lower low inside the yearly demand based on the fact it's coming off weekly supply and is still in that weekly downtrend, or whether it's already reversed. So I guess we'll see, but alerting these and just see what happens when they get them. But yeah, just be conscious they're aggressive if you're following them. And then finally on this layout, we've got CAD yen, which obviously got the big fall like all the yen cross pairs did on Friday. Similar to Aussie yen, it looked like it was going to create a weekly demand, which I actually had drawn in already. And then at the 11th hour, it fell and ended up actually didn't make a weekly supply, but has made a 3-day supply. But then similar to all the other yen pairs, I have been bear biased on this since it hit the 2-month supply. It also had, so this is one, again, the same mess as so many of the yen pairs. I think this might have been one that actually came. Okay, yeah, so this one actually came through the 6-month demand into the lower one. Again, you've got that stacked situation. Had a second 6 months that it went lower inside again, and then it's kind of closed back below, making a 6-month supply. It was not the best one. Similarly, it had a 3-month supply, but again, already tapped into that. So it's just one of the ones, and then also the 2-month higher inside. So at the moment, I think I've only got the 2-month drawn in, just so I can see what I'm doing and not have my whole chart be brown monthly supplies. But yeah, so I have been biased on this to the short side for a while because of all those different zones that were here. But it's just taken its sweet time to do a decent move, and still, it may or may not still be ready for it. It's still similar to the others, has all these trend line stops below, but still hasn't broken. It's still got wave retrace, wave retrace, wave retrace, or reversal, or retest, hopefully reversal. So that's kind of what I'm hoping on all of these, as I'm looking for that balance. And today we're not getting it, but it has come up in 2-month supply. There are other zones inside, but 2-month, 3-month, 6-month supply here would like to be nice to see a play out for this, in fact, potentially all the way down to the new zones and new demand all the way down here. But I need to see test of demand and then retest of supply hold to confirm that thesis. On the alert front, again, not too bad. Nice short there, and then this one got run through and this one got run through. Well, that one maybe just went higher in the zone, but didn't give a decent entry. This one I think did. I think that did, like one of the others. Or maybe it was no, and maybe it was late. Either way, no. So it's probably actually less good on the alerts here. So my bias has been correct, but getting the precision has been hard. So there's only, I think, 3 and 3. So 3 worked pretty well, and 3 were bad or dubious. What else do we have here? So yeah, I've set an alert here for 3-day supply. So yeah, a bit more 50-50 on the CAD. So the yen pairs are, yeah, the yen pairs are pretty mixed. The CAD has been better. I can't remember which one I said I thought was the best. Now I think Aussie CAD was probably the best one across the board so far. So that's all the FX pairs anyway. Let me just see what we're doing right now. Still going a little bit sideways. Then we'll do the metals, and I'll do metals and indices just to finish off with. So now just looking at metals. Metals is I only look at gold and silver. And I have actually kind of heavily left gold alone because after early, attempts to kind of look at the thoughts of earlier this year, I mean, obviously it's just crazy. So I stopped kind of trying to be even foresee or foretell or guess where short might be. I think I did actually have alerts. Just see. I do say all the alerts. So yeah, I think I was looking for the fib entries. So I did have an alert there for the fib entry, but really, yeah, so that was a while ago now. And so there's been a lot going on since then. So there's a leave on the current one. So this I've actually been more long bias, it seems here. I think I was looking here for the short of 4 hour, but I think just because gold has been so bullish, I've just kind of gone, it's not even worth looking for short entries. I wonder if I did, hold on, let me just go back to that again. Yeah, I think even these, like trying to get the aggressive ones, I just kind of gave up. The long entries have obviously been performing much more reliable and been performing a lot better than the short entries. The short entries really need to go to the upper extremes. Yeah, I think I kind of toyed with the idea of putting one there and then decided not to because it was still at that and still is coming off 3-week demand. Those two actually. So it's still got this new 3-week demand on this, so I still can't be hitting all my pictures again. Yeah, so still bullish on this until I actually see some flip of major supply at the highs. I think I kind of was thinking about looking for shorts. I think maybe back here or went on some of these tests here because it did have 5-day supply. But I think even then I was just like, I don't know if it wasn't clean enough for me to do it. So look for a long here, which gave a bit of a scalp, but not much. The long down here was really nice. This one wasn't an alert, actually. I just gave an update in an analysis channel about this. So that was kind of, I said that would be my lower time frame entry because I think they were looking for lower time frame analysis than I normally do. Here again, retest of that level. I think this might have been the 3 weeks, so it took a little bit of a wick. Decent entry there. And along here. So the longs are starting to be slightly less reliable here, I guess, compared to the ones I showed a minute ago. Still want to do more extreme, but I haven't really been focusing on this tool. I haven't been trading it myself. I had an alert here for 12-hour supply just because it's in a 3-day. This has now flipped to weekly demand. So again, a nice example of something that, so the alert's gone just before the weekend. However, the close happened and then it created a weekly demand right below, so obviously that would just inspire you to get straight out of that trade and just wait and see a little bit more first, because now it's made a new weekly demand sitting on top of this 3 week. It could just run. I don't like that it's left equal lows down here, so I've got another alert down there for that. But yeah, gold's still not particularly fun to trade on the mid time frames. I think if you're doing macro, fine, just hold it forever. If you're doing micro, fine. For scalps, but for so I just lost my train of thought because I just had somebody cackling with laughter. Anyway, silver's been a lot better actually. So silver, while I was wanting to be kind of bearish-ish or conscious of being bearish because we are in monthly supply, we did already tap that monthly supply. We had really nice long step back down here in the last quarter. And then I think I was hoping for retests in here, which we never got. Just got started to get this consolidation through here. I was conscious of this level, this 37.5 level, because that was 2 yearly highs. I don't know if they're on this chart. Excuse me. And so this yearly high was very possible area that it could have swing failed, so it was worth watching that for a first resistance. So I'm still putting hypothetical maybe short entries on this. So I had this, then I had the retest here, which obviously the second time we just went through. Then there's 2 week supply here, and I noted that AUDA had a different, these are the two brokers I use, AUDA and Forex.com. And AUDA's 2 weeks in a complete different place. So I just alerted a bit lower and said that was AUDA's 2 week and this is Forex.com 2 week. But that gave a nice reaction off there before pushing higher. And then finally it broken local demand here, coming back down into this lower demand, and then gave a nice short long re-entry this morning. So it's been pretty good on this actually. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 decent longs, a couple of decent shorts. This one was a little early. And then a couple of failures, but even this was sideways for long enough to get out of break even. Now it's just a question on this, are we reversing or not? Or is this still, are you still macro bullish on this? And to be honest, I still think from a high time frame perspective, it's still guessing. I've got a new monthly demand down there, so I'd like to see a bigger retest on this. Hopefully it's not going to be something like that wrecks everybody. We do have equal lows here that weren't taken out yet, so yeah, be a little conscious of aggressive longs on this if it does drop, just because of those equal lows. But yeah, the monthly demand is nice on that. Okay, so that's silver and gold. Good on silver, less good on gold. And then finally the indices. So the indices I said last month I was going to lay off them a little bit because again, they just go up. And unless you're trading them like actively, they become increasingly hard. I like them when they have volatility, but they become increasingly hard to trade when they're just going up and up, because you again need to be on top of the lower time frames to know if you think it's going to bounce, and watching on a 12-hour and 8-hour daily or 2-day demands or the immediate demands, and then they just don't come back for the weekly demands until they're ready to really dump, and then they seem to just dump right through them. Excuse me, still catching up on my protein from the gym. Okay, so we had this massive drop earlier in the year, and then since then it just kept going up. And I think in the last update, all these pretty much look the same. It was just like, are we going to make a lower high in here, or are we going to keep going, or are we going to swing for the high? And what we've had on NASDAQ and S&P kept going. The Dow's just come up for, at the moment, a swing failure, and Russell, EU, and have been weaker. Japanese yen's, well, J225 has been weaker, but now may pick up. And then Aussie and FTSE have been, similar to S&P and NASDAQ, they've kept going. So they're a bit of a mix, but Dow gave a nice top signal with it when it finally hit this high. But similar to how I just described with the FX pairs, like I just put in kind of hypothetical, when we still have supply to watch, I put in kind of hypothetical, we might, this is a weekly level or whatever it is. I think this was a 2-week level here, and it's just gone up inside. And I'm trying to get longs where I can, but short of, like I say, you need to be, on top of the charts to be able to go, right, let's long here and then see what the reaction is. And, and then, okay, there's another zone here. Okay, that already got tested and it's come down to the lower zone. So I tend to just stick with the higher time frame zones, or you get something like NASDAQ, which just keeps going, or like this type of run where you just don't get back in. It just doesn't give you an opportunity unless you get below, you're not back in this thing. So I think I had a long entry here. I don't know whether this might have been on weekly demand, so potentially still held that as a long entry if you were willing to hold through this mess. But then I obviously would scalped into a short for that. All of these charts, so I won't talk about all of them individually, but just be conscious, all of them have left gaps in PA, lower and all the way down to the bottom. Whether they come back and fill them, I don't know. And I actually did have a quick look just to compare the COVID up to a higher time frame, the COVID drop, because I was interested. So because the magnitude of this drop actually is not vastly different to COVID drop, and in fact, in the case of Dow, even whatever this was, the 2022, 2023 drop. So you can see the COVID drop, like it just went straight back up again, and I'm pretty sure it's left zones down here that haven't been retested. I feel like my levels have gone slightly funny there, but I don't know. I need to check those. Maybe they've altered the pricing of the chart or something. But you can see like there's certainly a weekly level here. There's a 3-day level. There's zones down here that weren't tested. So things don't have to come back and test, nor do you have to make a lower high after a significant drop like that. In contrast, we've got this move here. This was a bit of a slower drop. And when it had the significant drop, then also it did just keep going back up. We've got to give a couple of retests, but this was quite a nice tradable pattern. This, not so much. So whether we're going to do the same now or whether it's just going to keep going was kind of what I was trying to assess. And in the case of NASDAQ and S&P, they just kept going. Anyway, so what we do have on most of these now is new 2-month, 1 month. So I won't go into the detail of all of them, just talk about Dow, but there's 2 months, has 2 months demand, it's got 3 months demand. I think virtually all of them have sort of similar, or at least all the US ones. Correction, I think maybe US 2000 doesn't have it. So it's, and they're huge zones, but are we going to be in a COVID scenario, where we just, maybe we don't even test here, maybe we just keep going now because this is already in 2 months demand in the case of Dow, or whether we're going to have a nice tradable type, messing around here for a while. That would be really nice. But the indices don't typically give that, so I think we can't necessarily expect that. But it would be pretty nice, even if we give some But from the perspective that we still have 2 month, 3 month, 1 month demand below, then I've got to still be bullish on these unless I start saying. Locally, we have made weekly supply on this and a couple of the others, I think. I think NASDAQ and S&P only have daily, but this has weekly. So I'm alerted the weekly. I'm not sure why. I think that 12-hour maybe was already alerted, so I've just alerted a little bit higher here. It's got two 12 hours inside that haven't been tested, but again, it is coming off 2 month demand, so there's not necessarily high probability to short in here, but I just want to see what the reaction is if and when we get there. And somebody asked me about NASDAQ over the weekend, and I kind of just said, well, it's fallen now, so certainly wasn't the time to short. In the case of NASDAQ, it's got some stops below. I'll get to that, I guess, in a minute. But my point was like, now, once you've had a drop like this, we need just to see what's going to happen. You know, is it going to just do this and continue? Are we going to get some sort of decent consolidation and then continue, or is it just going to keep going up again? Because this can still very much be. Let me try and find a similar pattern. I don't know, even sort of something like this, you know, really this had some decent sized drops here and then just goes for another one, decent sized drop, you know, gives a break and retest. So this needs time. Like once you've had that first drop, that's great if you've managed to get into a short, but it needs time, and really overarchingly, this is still bullish. So yeah, anyway, on the alerts side of things, yeah, decent long there, but again, would have got stopped out if it was a scalp. But maybe the higher time frame held. Decent short, a short that got run through here. This short, I think, was for a 2-day supply at the top of this 2 week. So again, did give some reaction, but would have taken some time to actually think about it. Then I went for a lower high one here that obviously failed. These retest ones I do struggle with. I think maybe I just wait a bit too long. I think I'm always nervous on the first one. And then when I do it, you know, it's already hit demand. And I think I put that in there. I think that I put this as coming off 2 months demand. So this gave a nice long, but again, just up into local supply. And now we just need to see on this, didn't alert this 2 month level again. Like I would really like this to come back down into two weekly demand here and or the 3 month for a nicer long on this, but whether it will give me that is another matter. S&P and NASDAQ, like I say, I had very few alerts on this. So I had an alert here. I think this was a monthly supply or maybe a weekly supply. So that actually did give a decent reaction there. Some nice patterns to trade in here. I then had an alert for all-time high, which just went straight through. Here I was just a little bit too aggressive. I think, yeah, there was a daily supply in there. And in fact, sorry, I said it's too aggressive, but it did actually have a really good reaction. I think I had the same in this on this and Russell. Did actually have a really good reaction down to here, but was very, very quick. So it would have required having a profit already in place, but gave a little scalp off there anyway. And then on that, I kind of left it alone. Once they start breaking all-time high, and then it's just need to see some high time frame zones, because at any point, you know, it can break down. So for me, this is not a buy. I mean, you can trade for a trader, it's a buy, but unless you're actually actively trading it and monitoring it, it's not really a buy. This has come down into 4-day demand here, so I did have a long alert that went on Friday, so that's working quite nicely. And then it's got a new daily supply there, so I just want to see what the reaction is here. I put, you know, this is still high risk. It's still coming from higher time frame demand, but we'll just see what happens when we get up there. But yeah, all up not too bad on this, and I've pretty much left it alone. So like I say, that looks bad, but it actually gave a decent scalp. Cough is kicking in. It's so hot here at the moment. I just get very, very dry. The gym doesn't help that, but gym helps other things. NASDAQ, I think, is pretty much the same as S&P, except actually NASDAQ I did get some little longs. So NASDAQ, I think, here did finally come back, and I went, right, I'm going to aggressively look for longs on this. It was a 3-day and then a weekly demand. So I think the first one gave a scalp, and then it came back a bit lower for the next alert. And also a decent short here, just off that lower high. Then the alert for all-time high, and it just kept going. And then similarly here, this is just me being, again, a little bit too aggressive. I think it made a daily supply, and obviously just went straight through it. It wasn't the strongest daily supply. So hit the 4-hour demand and now coming back. So similar to S&P, just see if we get a reaction here. And these can potentially obviously retrace this entire drop. So If it's not, and if it's still bullish, it will. If it's bearish, and if this was like a blow off top to trap people in, then it might reject here, and that's why I've alerted. Only thing on this, and like I say, I did some analysis on this for somebody over the weekend, is it just left these trend line stops to here. So I sort of said maybe this wouldn't hold here, but this is where you should start looking for longs. But it could get down into this zone. It's a little bit lower. So yeah, but obviously it's just run straight from there. But it'd been, you know, a perfect world, but NASDAQ and indices never really give a perfect world. You know, perfect world is going to reject here, in fact, where my alert is all now, and then come back down into here, and then we just get some nice tradable PA. But yeah, all up, not too bad on that. And you know, it's good that it finally gave some decent long entries down there. J225. So I know this made 6 month and 3 month demand. So I was looking for longs in here. So the first bouncing off the 3 month gave a little bit of scalp, second bouncing off the 6 month gave a little bit of scalp and took its time, and then finally gave actually a really nice entry here. I think that was a daily or a 2 day demand before the pump upwards. Then I had an alert for daily supply or 2 day supply here, which is, I think it's gone through, it's quick through the zone. And then a long entry back on this 2 day demand at the weekend. So I think maybe this alert here for a short is too aggressive, but we'll see. But I know I had a short down here, which also wasn't too bad. So I think at this point I was still thinking, okay, maybe we can reject this and fall off the trend line. But you can see how, like all the indices I've gone through so far, you can see how they all have trend line stops below. But and while the thing is, I get very used to trend line stops on FX and on crypto. But we need to remember on the indices, like that so many of them have, like, you know, here it left a whole bunch of trend line stops that just took off. Like indices are, you know, they can stop hunt and they'll stop hunt low time frame for sure. But they also do these grinds up where they just keep going and they don't care if there are trend line stops. You can see that. I mean, even NASDAQ and S&P have just kept going despite the trend line stop building for ages. But I think what then happens is when they are ready to fall, that's when you get these big drops. Because it has left all these stops below. Which is why it's quite nice to get into shorts, but then it's very high risk until, you know, if you're not really sure that they're ready and you're kind of really guessing for quite a long period of time, and or it then goes without you because you're waiting for too high time frame confirmation. Anyway, all up, J225 has been pretty nice alerts. I think so far actually these have been pretty alright. I'm quite reasonably happy with them, and the ones I put in that haven't worked, I'm a bit like, okay, I knew I was being too aggressive when I did that, and it was just to kind of see, or just boredom. Russell, the US 2000, also decent. So again, just shorts throughout. My bias has been, so there's a 2 month supply from this brown line, so that first alert, and then I had a monthly inside it. It's got stops up here, so I don't know, again, is it going to go up and take those stops? But until it does that, I'm still kind of going, okay, this is monthly 2 month supply, I'm short biased. So now we finally, it took a long time to get the decent move down, but did give quite a lot of short scalps, at least in the interim, and then there's only one there, I think, that failed. And then a more aggressive long, last minute long, once it had made the double top, which when you look at it now looks stupid, but at the time I probably had some reason for that. And now has made weekly supply. So again, like all the others, all the US indices, just looking at what happens when are we going to react in here? Or are we going to pick up, you know, now the fact this is just retraced and it's just going to do another up move? So zones to watch, weekly here and 12-hour inside it, not the 12-hour immediate, and then 12-hour inside it if it wants to push a bit higher. 2, 3 remaining, EU50. So this is another one. This has made a 3 weeks. I've been much more bearish on this in general. I mean, it is coming from 6 month demand. Sorry, it hasn't hit the 6 month demand. I think it hit. Yeah, so it took a wick all the way down inside what was the 3 month demand, and it subsequently made a 6 month. I think I thought this was going to create monthly supply. I didn't. I'm not sure why I've been so bearish. I'm also looking at shorts on this. I think maybe it's just it had come up and it's gone up into weekly supply, and it had started making structure that looked like it was going to fall, whereas the others, the US indices and the FTSE had just made continuation structure, whereas this actually has given supply. So therefore it's then gives validity to start looking for more aggressive shorts. So I'd like this to come back down into the 6 month demand, if possible, please, for a long entry. You can say there's another gap down there. So this has now made 3 weeks supply at current price. So I did put an aggressive alert just in case we got the instant reaction. But indices have been pushing today. So this is still, hasn't pushed as much as the others, but it's still holding. It also has a weekly supply and a 5-day supply kind of up here. Inside, well, that's 4-day, and it might confirm the 5 days for tomorrow. So it's got 4-day and weekly supply here. I should probably prefer to have this on 4-day. So I don't like being a front run, it annoys me, so I'd rather the alert goes slightly early and then I just monitor it. So it's 4-day and weekly supply inside this 3-week. Again, could still hold here, but it's only a daily demand and it's already had a test. So again, just see what the reaction is when we get back up there. But all up, I think the alerts on this have been reasonably good as well. Let's go down to a lower time frame. I think the only one, so this, yeah, these two were just a little bit too aggressive. And I think maybe because it was a weekly supply. Then here I said, okay, we're probably going to go for the stops, and we actually ended up going for a whole bunch more. Nice long there, and then a really nice short re-entry. So it's nice when you continue to watch things for a long time and then you get that really solid re-entry once you've been waiting. But it's just trying to remember not to trade the mess, not to FOMO. And I suppose, yeah, it might be just that that's probably a bit of a flip comment, because with hindsight, it's very easy to say that. It's like, oh yeah, that was a great short, but at the time you probably would have been nervous. And then similarly, also it came up, so this is a 4-hour supply, and it came up into the zone 3 times before it actually rolled off. So well, it looks like that, I think you probably would have gone, maybe if you'd moved your stop to break even, you would have got knocked out on that one anyway. But it was nice. It's nice to see when they hold for the final, when you finally think this is ready to fall, like in this case, based off the double top. Yeah, so this I wouldn't be longing. This was the one I really didn't want to long. I mean, yes, it's on support and can just run up again from here, having just taken out that low, but 3-week supply, it could give a decent move down. So that's actually worth watching even now to see if it's going to give a reaction. Aussie 200. Again, this is a very, very messy zones on this, and I kind of keep moving around with the zones I have below it. It now has the same 3-month demand as everything else does, it like a lot lower, but I've struggled a bit with trying to get longs on this. So there was a decent long in there and a decent long here, but I think this gave just wicks in time. Then it gave a nice reaction off the swing fail here, and then it just broke through all-time high. I was really hoping this would come down. The alert went for this weekly zone on Friday as well, but it didn't quite hit the level. And then I did have an alert here for 8-hour supply, but it was probably the one I'm least confident of with all of them, because this is obviously one of the much more bullish charts, or not bullish charts, but sort of it's consolidating, ready to break out, whereas the others are in this slow grind up. This came down and it's given a solid retest in a daily zone. But yeah, so we can just see what happens here, and if we're looking at running strongly up in here, and maybe look at if the possibility of getting a swing fail of all-time high, if we get that, based on the play out here. I would just look at this for Confluence with the others, because if the others still have space to run, well, the indices do their own thing, country-based, but they do, again, the magnitudes are different, so they'll follow the same patterns, all of them generally, but then up down, but then the magnitude of the up down might be vastly different. So, and such that you'll then see, if we have a strong magnitude up on the US indices, but this was, let's say, EU50 wants to come down, it will still do the ups. And you can see that today, like I just said, in fact. So you can see that, NASDAQ's already gone up hard. Dow's catching up, is slow to start with. S&P's gone up hard. Shade 225 a little bit weak. I'm not looking at percentage changes, obviously, so it's not necessarily that easy to judge, but you can clearly see that EU50 has come down harder and is going up more softly. And Aussie is going up hard, and in the UK, FTSE is going up more softly. So they will go up together, but if they then don't break out, like in the case of, let's say, AU200, then it might come down harder next time when everything else is ready to retrace. Hope that makes sense. Anyway, yeah, so a little bit mixed on the alerts here. What have we got? We've got a long here was good, but just took time. That was a really nice short. That was a failed swing, failed short. This was again a little bit of a scalp, but yeah, again, not that clean. This was a really nice alert, but unfortunately didn't quite hit the level. And then now we'll just see. I probably won't set an alert up here. I'll just look and see what happens in there. But a little bit more 50-50 on AU. But overall, the indices I'm not overly upset by. They're sort of decent. For the most part, they're decent enough entries, decent enough alerts. And like I say, the ones that weren't are the ones that I've just either just kind of thrown one in there for just amusement value, just to see what happens. And again, most of those I have disclaimed in the notification. And then finally, we've got UK 100 FTSE. So again, looking for the swing failed all-time high here. It got slightly before that. So again, the alert went, but gave nice shorts. But if you waited, you would have missed it. And then when it came back, it just went through. Anything earlier, no. And then a couple of decent shorts here. Well, so decent short there. This one probably wick through the level, depending on what time frame it was, but may have given a scalp. And then it really just went up. And similarly, I think, again, just not come back and give me the entries that I want for longs. I've been trying to get longs on this. My bias was up on this once everything else started breaking out anyway. And it illustrates a challenge, again. I think that, you can see this again, even if you traded, I wouldn't have called the all-time high retest as a trade unless there was a zone there. But again, it hasn't quite hit it. So it just likes to be slightly awkward. And then it made a 2-day demand here, and I was considering whether I'd put an alert on this 2-day here, but it hasn't come back there. And in fact, it tested it on the daily, tested the level on the daily, but then it made sort of this choppy little daily before moving up again. But again, now, and even on this wick, hasn't come back down into this zone for me to kind of go, yes, this is a decent place for a long now. Like, it likes to wick and just run, thus leaving all the gaps below. So anyway, I think that's pretty much it. And this stream is now 2 hours, 7 minutes. So if you are watching this, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're interested. I will happily do more streams on FX if people are more people are interested, but I have way more people following me in crypto, so I tend to do more like live streams or live, as in more current alerts on crypto, whereas this I do with hindsight just to see how well we've done, just to discuss. Just to get a little bit of, like I say, my own perspective, kind of nail my own perspective, particularly of macro movements, and then also just to kind of monitor how well my alerts are doing and if there's anything I can learn from them. On the learning front, I'm trying to think, what can I learn from, I don't think there's actually much to learn. I think I made the observation last month that, or last quarter when I did this last update, that when the majors were trending, then the cross pairs were better for me to trade, and vice versa, because I prefer range trades and I prefer the bouncing between supply and demand rather than the strong moves. The problem with implementing that is you don't tend to know something's trending until after it's trended or until it's quite far. Once it's already broken out and it's already gone through 3 alerts, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's trending, and by then it's probably ready to consolidate. So it's not necessarily the best thing to implement. The main learning, I think, from this month, or this quarter, or this 2 months, is that if zones are large, then it's learning that we knew already that zones are larger, but you're looking for that initial reaction. And if you don't get it, then obviously you've just really got to wait for the whole market to be ready and for the structures to match what you're expecting, because monthly zones can take a really long time to play out and can push significantly inside if they want to. And then back to my usual comments that confluence is king. Like, if the market isn't ready, if you're not seeing all the US dollar pairs, all the US dollar quote pairs at resistance and all the base pairs at support, or vice versa, then you're probably not going to get the big trade you want. You might get some nice scalps, but it probably won't be ready for the big trade. Indices then are just up, and gold and silver are just up, so any shorts are obviously high risk. But can give good reactions if you get the right moment, but the the win rate is much lower, but the reaction is good if you get it. But you must use a stop on any short entries. Long entries are more for the investment and can be held, obviously. So any dips you can just buy until we see otherwise, and probably won't ever see otherwise on S&P and NASDAQ on the high time frame anyway, unless we really go into a recession. And we do have that risk coming. So think we didn't. I think we had a good GDP outcome, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago? But I think, whatever the argument is, I think I read it was 2 quarters to define a recession, 2 to 4 quarters of negative GDP. But then somebody else, I read 3, and then somewhere else I read 4. So I don't know what the official definition is, but really, it's not even that. It's like what is the world doing? Obviously a lot of people have fear of what Trump's doing. I'm intrigued just to see what happens in the long term, and if there's method in madness, because I think there's certain ways of doing things that make me think it's like, is he a genius or is he just going to ruin the world? But yeah, there's some things that have certainly worked out in his favor. And it's just, what's the end game? He's only 6 months into the term, so what's the end game on this? And how is it going to look in 4 years' time? And I think we should. I think with any politics, like regardless of whether you love or hate Trump, there's a lot of debate around that. For me, one of my frustrations when I was in Australia is that it seemed. I don't follow politics loads, to be fair. I find it fairly frustrating and annoying. But the critical thing is let the party govern. That's kind of what I think. Like, I vote for who I vote for, and if I win, great. If I lose, then I'm like, just shut up about it, and let the other side do what they do. And then maybe at the end of 4 years, I'll be like, oh wow, you actually did way better than I expected. But the real problem we had in Australia, which may be replicated elsewhere in the world, again, I don't follow enough, it's very probably it's the same in the UK, but I'm not sure. There were a lot of like hung governments and things where they were. And what I used to see was that they were sort of desperately trying to get a budget through and unable to get a budget through until 2 years into the term. And then it's like, well, what can you do? And then you're full of criticism, and they're doing this, that, and the other wrong. But it was like, how can you do anything really that valuable? I mean, Trump's actually, he's trying to do stuff in the first 6 months. And I'm damned if I ever saw that in Australia, like things happening. Like in the first 6 months, they're faffing around trying to get budgets approved, and nobody's approving, and everyone's arguing. And it's kind of like, well, what's the point in even having a government if they're not allowed to govern? So love them or hate them, whoever's in, you've got to say, well, 50% of the population voted them in, so maybe I'm wrong if I'm voting the other way. Maybe the other 50% know better than I do. But at least let them do their 4 years. And that was always my big frustration, was my rant, my outro rant. Always my frustration in Australia. And then Australia also had the added thing where they were like throwing out a prime minister every year or so. I can't even remember what the reason for that now. I think I dropped it out in so much disgust. Again, just let the person govern. If you're going to vote the party in, you have to trust to some extent that the party is, the party is what more than 50% of people wanted, barring the complexities of voting. We won't get into that. And if you're not on that same side, then you just have to let them get on with it. But nobody ever does that. So anyway, I would just want to see. So my view on Trump is I just want to see what the next 4 years will bring, and the state of the US and the state of the world at the end of that. Let's hope the world still exists. That'll trigger a few people. Anyway, if you're watching this, I hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to ask me any questions in the FX Telegram channel if you want, and join there. If you're using the alerts, let me know if you think I can do something better, or if you think I'm missing something, or if you just like I have a fair people, well, not a lot, but a fair few people actually look at them, appear to view them. Whether they use them, I don't know. So that'd be really great to get some feedback if you say, if you think there's anything I can learn from, or if you think I could just do slightly different, maybe do lower time frames or whatever, just slightly different style. And yeah, so anyway, I hope you all have a great week. Trade safely. Be conscious at least of what I said at the beginning on the dollar and the indices and the potential of recession. And yeah, it will really be interesting to see what these indices do, these new supplies, in fact. It's the first time they've made a decent drop like that and significant supply in a while. And I'm really hopeful that we get some nice sideways PA, because indices are really nice to trade when they do the sideways. They just don't do the sideways very often. Anyway, so have a good week. Yeah, that's it. Bye.